welcome everybody to another episode of Game Rivals. I'm your host Maximilian X, coming to you live from the interwebs, and today I am joined once again by the Guardian himself, RiceBoyyyTV. How's it going, Rice?
Hey Max, it's so good to be here, man. Like even just before we start it, just before we were recording here, like it was just so nice to see you. It's been a
Yeah.
while. We've had, respective busy summers and for whatever reasons, but it's so good to kind of be back into the swing of things. So thank you for thinking of me and for having me back on the podcast.
Of course, we said we would be doing this again, and I'm glad that we're able to do this,
Yes,
even
sir.
though it's a little bit later than we would have liked.
Yes.
Also, partially because, well, what we were going to be talking about was delayed itself.
Yes.
So, yeah, nice to have you back. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate that. It has been a while since we've been able to properly speak to one another, but also just being on the podcast here again, because I think the last time we did it was also almost a year ago when we were here with Naomi. So
yeah, Christmas time, and that was a fun podcast.
Oh, that was definitely fun. That was a fun podcast. Yeah, got to talk about sibling rivalries and stuff.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, so let's just jump right into things, because we're here to talk about Destiny 2 in general, but also about the final shape, which seems to be the last bit of DLC that we're gonna get from Bungie, but at least for the time being. And if they're ever gonna work on Destiny again, it's also allegedly up in the air. We don't know. But how is your experience? First of all, let's start with your general experience with Destiny 2. How has that been for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking about this game. It's arguably one of my favorite gaming experiences for various different reasons. And I will say in a nutshell that it's been a roller coaster. As someone who started off my Guardian journey on Destiny 1 when it was a console exclusive, was pretty unique. And it was my first MMO experience, and I liked shooters at the time. I gravitate toward shooter experiences, but I hadn't really explored anything too deep in terms of RPG, MMO stuff. And Destiny is really what reeled all of that into one place for me. On top of that, just kind of interacting with a really cool player base and a community, and growing with each other and trying to really navigate where the story and where the lore could go was one of the most fascinating things for me as someone who really dives into narrative-driven things. This was a world that I loved immersing myself into. Now, that said, Destiny had so much to offer, and going into Destiny 2 feeling this new kind of whimsical rebuilt universe rather, where we could explore even more things in the light and dark saga. There were seasons where it did feel perhaps a little bit janky in terms of where the story was going. And while kind of all of these little pockets that we were experiencing as the Guardian were kind of isolated into, little DLCs, expansion, and content drops, some were better than others. And there was this kind of pattern. And I think that if you talk to a regular Destiny player, they would likely emulate the same sentiment. They would say, I will go hard and grind for like a couple weeks and finish that DLC, finish that part of the campaign, and then would kind of drop off. And leading up to the final shape, that was still kind of the general trend. And so, mind you, players like myself had been playing for the better part of a decade. And so that's what I'll say. That's what I'll say, kind of going into it. That was my experience going into the final shape. Really crazy roller coasters.
So you were talking about that there were some ups and downs, of course, with the content and with the stories. Is there any particular update or DLC that kind of like encapsulates that perfectly for you? That's like, oh, this was like definitely like a low point, or like, yeah, I don't know why they did this during the sub day. Like,
Yeah.
is there anything like that in there?
Yeah, there was a very early Destiny 2 expansion called Warmind. I think it was called Warmind. Anyway, exploring the character of Rasputin, and I think that at that point in time, there was a lot of kind of rumble with the community as to why are we going here? What is the story going to do for us in the near future? And then it improved. We got Beyond Light, which was our first experience with darkness and using abilities that are from the darkness, and that was new and an exciting thing. And this idea of like light and dark isn't necessarily good and bad. They are tools to be used for good and for not so good. And I learned that kind of exploring different characters' decisions and kind of choices in and around using these tools is what enhanced the story for me, and also helped inform my decisions as a guardian. So it's those moments that really encompass like the high
Mm-hmm.
DLCs like Warmind, as well as previous to the final shape, not long before Lightfall,
Yeah.
was a really scary kind of low, because the way that everyone was feeling, I won't say everyone, the way that a chunk of the community was feeling was very confused, and perhaps even a little bit pessimistic about where the game was going to go. Some people were even being pretty hyperbolic and saying like, is this the end? Is this the end of Destiny 2? And not because of the story, but rather just what we were getting as a consumer.
I do remember that kind of uproar coming around when that dropped, because there were a lot of people that were not down with it when it came out, and basically the way it was when it released. If I'm not mistaken, I think there were some updates after that fixed some stuff, but I'm not 100% sure if that was the particular story that had some fixes done to it,
You're
or at
bang
least in
on,
terms of
actually.
content. Yeah.
You're bang
Oh,
on.
okay.
It was Lightfall, and then there was a smaller content drop, which wasn't like a full expansion,
Yeah, exactly.
called Into the Light.
Yes,
And
that's the
Into
one.
the Light came out with some new activity and really good kind of like weapons and drops that players could get that really encourage people, and
Mm,
also kind of set the stage for the final shape.
yeah.
And it really did kind of like redeem the Lightfall experience for some people, and said like, oh my goodness, like, okay, this is ramping up into something big. And I've kind of said this in a few other instances. It was actually Dad, YouTuber, that had said that this final shape, this expansion, was the Avengers Endgame moment for Destiny.
Damn.
And
Okay.
so yeah, that was what people were feeling going into the final shape.
Yeah. So in terms of, we're probably going to get into it a little bit more, because I'm going to ask you about your experience playing the final shape. Does it feel like a good conclusion, or does it feel like they left something open that might have had another like DLC maybe like a year later?
Yeah, good question. And I know that not everybody will share my opinion, but I think that it actually could have tied things together quite nicely. It could, and I would be fine with. I would be quite satisfied if, and maybe it's because my desire for gaming experience is for some sort of narrative to come to an end, to come to a close, because that gives me kind of like a sense of accomplishment. Adds to the nostalgia. But there are 3 episodes, I believe, planned for the seasonal content. And there is, let's just say, well, I mean, it's been out long enough. If people want to play it, they'll discover that at the end of the game, there there are still events happening. So let's say the aftermath of the conclusion is what's unfolding now.
Okay, so assuming we know that they're not going to do anything more of Destiny 2, they could use these episodes to like tie up loose ends.
I think so. I think they should, to be honest. Yeah, I believe that it's enough time for players to really kind of get their money's worth, but also get their 10-year saga's worth events to a conclusion. So I would hope that that's where they're for various reasons that I'm sure we'll be talking about today.
Yeah, because you're talking about 10 years, and I'm going to be completely honest. When they announced Destiny originally, and they said this was like a 10-year saga thing, in my mind, because I was not thinking of this as an MMO back when it was announced. I was thinking of it as like they were literally going for a trilogy. So if you're gonna have like 10 years to make these games, like the bulk of the work would be done by Destiny 1, and then basically you're using the skeleton of Destiny 1 to improve upon, and then you make Destiny 2 a couple of years down the line, and then you do Destiny 3 a couple of years down that line, and then basically you have 10 years of like Destiny. That was how I originally saw that, until they said like, oh no, this is going to be like more of an online experience. There's going to be an ongoing story, blah, 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 blah. Then it got really confusing, at least to me, that, okay, so you've done Destiny 1, and then now you're going to do Destiny 2. And then they left Activision, which partially I feel like good for them. And then they added up with Sony, and Sony gave them the free reins. And then I thought like, okay, that's great. And then all the stuff happened afterwards. So that means with the final shape, it's probably the end of Destiny 2. We're maybe not going to see Destiny 3. So that's a mystery that we'll be talking about. But at least for now, you've played the final shape. I know that you play with friends, so I think you have like a fixed party that you play with.
No, I mean, my focus has been welcome anyone who has not tried Destiny into the experience.
Cool.
Actually, typically I would run the campaigns with my sister Neil, but she has been incredibly busy and transitioning into kind of a new season of life. We didn't get to play together. On the contrary, I actually played a ton of the final shape and just random match activities here and there, because I just wanted to kind of jump in and talk about. But that said, I will still be playing for the foreseeable future to kind of welcome new lights into the experience.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Is this the first time that you've had to do that with like new content, or is this something that you like do on and off? I mean, I know that you welcome new lights to Destiny more often, but like specifically like doing the new DLC when it first drops, is that something that you've soloed for multiple times before or not?
Yeah, so good question. I started Destiny as a solo player. Because everybody games for different reasons. And I think that growing and a lot of my gaming experiences were kind of they leaned on playing solo because it was an escape from the and it wasn't until actually really diving into Destiny that like I really enjoyed the multiplayer cooperative experience much more. Now there's PvP activities, and that became something that I came to enjoy with other people. But I think that I would always lean more towards the player versus environment activities, and that's fun, like kind of working together with people. I would say that my play style has evolved over time.
Okay, cool. You did mention that this was your first MMO, so that does make sense for you to like start off playing it solo. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the final shape, because I'm actually kind of really curious about this one, especially after Lightfall and how the community reacted to that. I feel like, at least someone looking from the outside, this was received a lot better.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was received better than the one that came before Lightfall, which was, I think,
Witch Queen.
The Witch Queen, because I think people really love that one.
Witch Queen was phenomenal. Yes. Yeah, there
So,
were big twists and turns with certain characters, especially Savathun, and Savathun kind of yeah, really it provided this really big story that I guess I'd say that it was so intertwined with what we were doing as Guardian that we were so invested in what could be, and then when it was revealed X, Y, and Z was Sabbath, there was the impact the community felt of like, oh my gosh, like that was such a twist. Didn't know that. What is she up to? What is next? So right, it kept people invested in that story, and
yeah.
I will say that the Witch Queen is still paying off in the events of the final shape.
Oh,
I
damn.
love
Okay.
that. Yeah, yeah.
That's cool. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So how did you feel going into the final shape?
Heavily anticipatory, and I was nervous. I wanted to be a little bit like cautious. I was reluctant to just be like, this is gonna be so good. Didn't want to get my hopes up because there was this general trend of like being excited only to feel like, oh yikes, like that's not where I would have gone with the story. And that's different from like a writing choice that you don't agree with, but still understand, right? Yeah, there's this feeling of like, oh, that feels out of place. So yeah, I kind of lost track of the question. What was your question?
My question was, how did you feel going into the final shape?
Yeah. So yeah, very very anticipatory. But I ended up really enjoying my time. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of all the DLC that's come out, how does it like stack in terms of like the pacing of it all? Does it feel like the story beats come along just as often as they did in previous story DLC?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the higher tier DLCs. I really enjoyed my time, and like I said, like if this is the end of Destiny 2, I think that they did it well. It really felt like a love letter to longtime veterans. It really felt like this is like a big climactic payoff to everything that we have gone through. You know, it's not without problems and plot holes here and there, but there's just so much lore. It's such a big universe. It's 10 years of content and story, and even outside of what's directly presented to you in the game, there's so much more. So if outside of just the gameplay, like if you're reading the books, if you're reading the lore that you unlock, that's hours and hours and hours of content that's not in direct storytelling with your cinematics, with your activities. And it's a lot to take in. But for those who have invested, and this is a specific group of the community, I suppose, for those who have invested in the lore, in the deeper stories, and all of these character arcs, there is a payoff. But for someone who is coming into it and perhaps like wanting to experience all of Destiny, probably a little too overwhelming to take in.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Because there is a lot of lore that you probably need to be catching up if you're going to it from that perspective. That being said, another aspect of Destiny that is very popular amongst most players is, of course, getting the weapon loadouts, getting your legendaries, and all that stuff, and building upon your character's set and making it more unique to yourself. I would say. How do you feel that did they add more in that regard for you to say like, oh, I can do more stuff now as my chosen guardian, or do you feel like, oh, it's a little bit more samey, or the quality of the gear that you can get is, I don't want to say fallen off. That sounds that sounds
no,
so
I
over
get it.
exaggerated, but yeah.
No, I totally get it, because I mean, to be honest, some people did feel that, even those terms fallen off. There were seasons where Bungie had kind of made the decision to vault certain content.
Yeah.
You know, controversial takes on that, and like some people understood, but also a huge chunk of the community was like, that's content we paid for and should have access. They have addressed issues like that with mechanics like the timeline, for example. Timeline wasn't implemented until Into the Light, I believe, and that is a way to experience past expansions, or at least past pivotal moments in the story, so that, you know, new lights can kind of be contextualized going into the final so that was kind of like a last minute effort to address that issue. Another one was the sunsetting of weapons. So what that means is that certain weapons were no longer
usable.
Yeah, they were no longer able to be upgraded to the current light level. So
that's
they
even
stayed
worse.
Right, yeah, they stayed at the level cap of that previous expansions. Yeah. So they kind of were deemed use. And while I understand what they were trying to do, because they were making room for new weapons, for new experiences, and for people to kind of gravitate towards those, some of those weapons all the way back from the beginning were so beloved. Yeah. And to kind of like take that away by sunsetting them was really, really crappy.
Yeah.
But they did address that, which then caused more controversy by unsunsetting them.
Oh, wait, really?
Yes. So I could take my old Recluse, which is a submachine gun that I love to use in PvP, and upgrade it to the highest light level, the current level. So like there were people like myself who looked at like some of the old sunset weapons. I can level this up. It's okay. I guess the drawback with that is that after you upgrade them, you realize I actually like don't need to use this anymore because there are newer weapons that kind of replace the function of these.
Yeah.
So it is kind of a push and pull with that. So I think those are the two kind of biggest that people had with certain updates and certain. Always gonna be an issue with balance. The way that with this game, like it's all about how the weapons interact with the environment or the player. So it's a really hard thing to balance, I think. So that's always going to be a major gripe. I don't know that's ever going to be like the whole community is never going to be satisfied. So there's always going to be a group of people that's just going to be like, this isn't balanced, blah 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 blah. But it is.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious how other MMOs do it, because I myself, I mean, I've dabbled into like other MMOs before. A little bit of World of Warcraft, a little bit of Guild Wars, Final Fantasy 14 a little bit as well.
Right.
Like, always like a little bit. But
yeah, for sure.
For example, if actually with Final Fantasy 14, in my experience, I don't know if you've played it, but with Final Fantasy 14, when they sunsetted the original Final Fantasy 14 and then pivoted to A Realm Reborn, a lot of things changed.
Yes.
And so I came in when A Realm Reborn was coming out first.
Right.
Got that all. And it felt different because I never played the original one, but it felt different from like Final Fantasy 11, which I touched like a little bit in previous years. It is from then to where I played last, which was, I want to say, not the one that came out now, not Dawn Trail, not the one that came out before that. I forget which one it is, but it was the one before that. I jumped back into it because they were doing like these massive like promotions, like, oh, hey, come back and play like for free for like a month or 2 weeks or blah, 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 blah. You know, like trying to get people back into it. It's like, you know what? Let me do it because I have a little time now.
Shadowbringers?
Check it out. Thank you, Shadowbringers. That's the one. And I jumped into Shadowbringers, and everything was different. Like my character was untouched.
Right.
So a lot of things around what my character was able to do had changed.
Yes.
And they changed with it. But a bunch of stuff that I had before were still usable. Because, you know, it's still early game stuff, and I was like able to like level up a lot faster now because of that. It felt so much fun to play. I don't know what changed. I don't know what they all changed in that time, but it was so much more fun to play Final Fantasy 14 for me. I was like if I'm not careful, they're gonna get like $15 a month for me, and that's not like that was not my aim. Of like re-experiencing Final Fantasy 14. I was just curious to see like why people are gravitating towards it so much. And even though I spent only a month playing it, I can understand what brought people back to it, right?
Yes.
And they addressed everything that was wrong before Realm Reborn, and ever since they've built upon that. So it does feel like, at least for Square Enix, their team was able to figure out how to make everything work without newer players or lapsed players to feel left out or feel like they won't be able to catch up. The story in general is just really well told, but again, it's Final Fantasy. You kind of expect that, but like it kind of goes above and beyond, to be honest. So it is kind of weird, and then you hear about experiences in, for example, Destiny, but not just Destiny 2, but also other MMOs that are not doing the same thing. And it's like, so are you not doing the same thing because it doesn't fit your gameplay style or the game's MO, or is it just because it doesn't make sense, or if it would be too much of a hassle to like look at it from that perspective and see how can we do something similar and keep our current fan base happy, but also make sure that it is a game that lasts for a really long time. Because I think Final Fantasy 14 I think they're both the same age, or Final Fantasy 14 is a little bit older.
2013.
Okay, yeah. Destiny 2 was like 2013, 14 as well.
Yeah, so they are the same age.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting to see how that worked. And especially when we talk about like the vaulting thing.
Yes.
I'm not a Destiny 2 fan, but when I heard that hurt me. And
I'm not hurt for people.
That hurt me. Like, as a gamer, as like a developer, it's like, that makes no sense.
Yeah.
Because if you are a developer and you're trying to make the best game possible for your player base, right? You don't want to like exclude stuff from it. It makes, like, from an MMO perspective, it makes no sense, because nothing an MMO has ever done outside of maybe sunsetting certain items or basically making them ineffective for like new areas or stuff like that. That part I get, because that's just a balancing thing, right?
Yes.
Because you cannot rebalance items all the time. I mean, it's the same reason why, like, if you look, this is a little bit of an extractive sample, but if you look at fighting games, they try to not have too many fighters unless it's intended to be like something like a party game. Like, for example, like Marvel vs. Capcom or Smash Brothers. Game franchises that have a lot of characters. Balancing is a little bit different versus, like, say, like playing a Street Fighter 6 or a Tekken 8, where the roster is relatively smaller, so they can balance that a lot better.
Yeah.
The same thing goes for any kind of game, right? Including MMOs. So when they announced the vaulting thing, that was super weird. I did not know about the sunsetting.
Yeah.
The sunsetting I understand, but in combination with the vaulting, I think that kind of drove people over the edge. And then I understand why they brought it back, but I think they should have stuck to their guns and not do it, because I think the experience that you just talked about, like, oh, hey, this weapon that I used to use a lot, I can now use again, and it's usable, and I can upgrade it. But then later you're like, oh wait, but it's kind of pointless because I have this newer weapon that actually is more effective.
Exactly.
So now you're just tossing everything basically against the wall and see whatever sticks, and it's not a great experience. I feel, for any kind of player in that moment, right? Whether you're into the lore or whether you're into gear collecting, in both instances, I don't think that anybody would feel particularly heard, which is kind of a weird thing to say, because it feels like, oh, you're just doing whatever to see whatever. And I don't know if you know this guy Ralph from like Skill Up.
No.
He has this YouTube channel called Skill Up. He's also like a big Destiny 2 fan, and one thing that he always talks about when he talks about Destiny is like, he'd rather have that the developers that Bungie worked on a way to better introduce new lights than like take stuff away or bring stuff back in a weird way or introduce stuff that makes no sense. Because then you're not only making it complicated for the existing lights, you're making it complicated for new lights to join because they're going to get overwhelmed because things are just changing every couple of months.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about that. I think that there's I don't know if it's an issue of the game being an MMORPG first person shooter where a lot of perhaps the MMOs that I have explored, they kind of each class caters to weapon archetypes that you have access to and not have access to, in where in terms of the guns in Destiny 2, all classes have access to almost all of those. Maybe like 1, 2, 3, you can count on your hands how many are exclusive to the Titan, exclusive to the Hunter, or exclusive to the Warlock. It wasn't enough to differentiate that experience.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that there are abilities, but I think that that wasn't a differentiating factor in terms of the experience, because mostly you're using your guns there. And so, like, I think that played a large part in how Bungie made decisions in terms of what needed to be in the game and what could be into the game. And I think that you make a valid point, and a lot of people have made this, is that, like, how in the world are new players going to invest in your game if they cannot find some sort of landing pad that makes sense for them to even invest? Because it's just this overwhelming wall of content that's going towards you at the speed of light.
Gosh darn it. I saw it coming and it's still, gosh darn it.
And it really was just tough. I've invited so many people to come, but I also understand why they said no. I'll even go as far as to say that the final shape was for the veteran Destiny players. It was for the people that invested their time into it and either couldn't stay away or decided to come back.
Yeah. Also, the other thing, because of the vaulting, especially in terms of like story stuff, really hard to bring the new players in. Now, you said that they did the timeline thing. I was actually kind of, because I heard that they were doing the vaulting, and I guess the timeline thing is what they were talking about. But how does that work? Is it like actual like Cliff Notes stuff that you're seeing or reading, or does the player actually get to re-experience those pivotal moments?
Yeah, so they are pivotal missions that you experience within these expansions that kind of give you the big moment that will have a payoff in the final shape. So it's still specifically kind of curated for that final shape experience. It's intended to, I guess, point people towards that last expansion.
Usher them in. Yeah,
exactly. So it's, again, I think it was a Hail Mary, and like you said, just throwing stuff at the wall, hoping that it sticks. It was late in the game. You know, the reason why I talk about Destiny 2 is because I happen to be one of the players that has invested time into it all these years. Yeah. But unfortunately, my experience with trying to invite people in, especially like this late in the franchise, like it's near impossible. And I totally and as a veteran player myself, like, you know, like I am experiencing at this point like that same pattern of falling off. They're just grindy activities that you've done for because I can praise the narrative all day long, right? And the campaign, I will give it its flowers, but it's a small portion of the full MMO experience. I will give it like a 9 out of 10. You know, the narrative, the campaign experience, and even just some of the mechanics that have been built into this expansion. But unfortunately, it's just a small portion of the game, and it's very, very difficult to get people to play with me.
Yeah, I understand. Do you feel so? This is basically gonna be the last thing I ask about the final shape, because I also want to talk about the other stuff that we mentioned before. Do you feel that the timeline, if you look at how, I don't know if you actually tried out the timeline yourself, like, do you feel like that actually does a well enough job to usher people into the final shape that are new to it, that you're like, oh, hey, look, I understand that there's a lot of stuff, but hey, let's do this like timeline thing and like then get into the final shape, and I promise you you're gonna have like an incredible time going through all that.
Yeah, it's hard to make a definitive statement, but I will say this, that the timeline provides you with, like, you don't want to get into a show that everybody's watching, but you haven't watched the previous seasons, and you don't even really have the time to binge watch those seasons. You go to YouTube, and then you hope that there's a creator that makes you like a synopsis over, you know, like seasons 1 and 2 in 5 minutes or in 10 minutes or something like that. I would say the timeline functions like that. Okay. So they are pivotal moments that kind of were moments that players emotionally invested in, that create, I guess, some form of attachment to a character that will somehow pay off in the campaign of the final shape. Will it contextualize every little bit of the narrative? And that's where I guess the aim of that would be to buy the DLC. Like, here's a piece of this, right? This is the premise of expansion. If you want more, here's this like pivotal mission. If you want more of this, get the DLC. And that way you will be fully contextualized going into the final shape.
Right.
I guess the answer is no. But you'll have enough, right?
Okay.
You'll have enough
fair.
in your
oh dear. I mean that's fair. I don't know what they were hoping or expecting that would do, because you're then still missing like the emotional investment in that. So yeah, I get that. All right, so final shape, it's out. Then a whole bunch of stuff has come out about Bungie since, and
yikes. Yikes.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't talked about the news in a while, and like, especially not this news, but like a Cliff Notes version. Basically, around 300, almost 300 people got fired from Blizzard as a part of Blizzard not being able to basically show results in terms of Destiny 2 doing well enough. But also, apparently, they were working on a bunch of other stuff in the background that we did not know about. Stuff that's been canceled. They're still working on Marathon, but how that's going to shape out, we don't know. How Destiny, like we said before, how Destiny 2 is going to end might be with these 3 episodes that are coming out. Hopefully they do, because I don't think at this point they should tease anything else, because the team has gotten a lot smaller. And basically what seems to be happening is where when they were originally bought by Sony, they retained their independence despite being a part of Sony, being part of PlayStation team. But they had their autonomy. They were allowed to do whatever they needed to do as long as they produced results. Unfortunately, just like any other company that has higher ups, they shot themselves in the foot. Multiple times, it seems. And even their CEO apparently allegedly showed off his car collection to employees days before having to tell them they were being let go.
It was such a middle finger, bro.
That I've heard some really scummy stuff in my day covering like video game news. This probably is up there. I don't think that this is the worst thing I've heard about a CEO doing. Because, you know, the guy that used to run, what is it? Dingus, his name again.
Parsons.
No. From Microsoft. The one before, Don Matrick.
Oh, okay.
Holy crap. That dude almost destroyed Xbox. That is bad. Like, John Riccatello is bad. He almost destroyed EA and he almost destroyed Unity. So that's pretty bad. This ranks up there, but it's not as bad as those guys.
Sure.
It's still pretty bad.
Here's a line from an article that says former Destiny 2 community manager Leanna Rupert shared a story on social media of struggling to find money for groceries while working at Bungie, while Parsons bragged about a few new expensive cars he bought that you can come to his house and see them. Wow.
Bro, wow. Okay, that's sick. That's
awful.
Listen,
is, as one of the people who understands that groceries are not cheap, you know, whatever economy that you're in, like it's hard out here.
It is hard.
And this guy's like, yo, check out my ride. You should come over and check out my ride. Oh, you're fine.
I swear, honestly, see, like this is the reason why what basically seems to be happening right now. Mm-hmm. They had to downsize a lot of stuff. A lot of projects that they were working on, they had like apparently a bunch of incubation projects going on, all gone. The only focus right now is just supporting Destiny 2 as it is and trying to finish Marathon, which at this point, we don't know how the Marathon team is doing because outside of the original trailer, we haven't heard anything. And considering everything going down with Bungie, the odds are that they're going to be reporting to... Well, actually, no, it's pretty much been confirmed because a part of the people... Because some people were let go. Some people were folded into Sony.
Yeah.
So that's already happening. It's just a matter of time before that happens. Exactly. So with all that nastiness being said, what is your, like, how do you see them having a shot at like a Destiny 3? Actually, a better question is, how do you see them having a shot at Destiny 3, and do you want to see a Destiny 3 after playing the final shape?
Great question. I have an answer for that. I didn't have an answer for that like a few weeks ago. I will say that I think that this should be the... I followed Bungie for a long time before Destiny. I was with them in the Halo days and just praised them for the games that they made and for, you know, the various developers and creators that I have followed in and around those things. Oh boy, with all of this, you know, back-end news coming out, I just don't think that it's wise, because here's the thing. Here's the real tough part of this, right? Like all of those projects you were talking about that were in the works and then are kind of just like put under the rug. That sucks, because a lot of developers were working on those things really hard, very passionate people, talented, artistic individuals and teams, really putting their heart and soul into X, Y, and Z. And then for that to be gone, and also for Bungie sole moneymaker being Destiny 2, that is not a good look. Yeah. It is not a good look for the future. And so, like, if you even just look at those numbers and realize that they're losing money and that they're probably going to have to push for insolvency, it's really hard for someone who has invested this long to believing that the experience will remain up to par.
Yeah.
If even. Like, I don't have for a Destiny. I think that it should die. Yeah. But at the same time, right? Like, if that's their only moneymaker, like, we need something from Marathon. Consumers need to see some gameplay. We need to see your final Hail Marys, because this is a very scary time for Bungie. And I just want to, like, reiterate that, like, I said this on the PlayStation Generation podcast, but like, when I think about these layoffs, man, I think about families. I think about people's livelihoods, their passions and their talents. And I follow a few people on LinkedIn that worked for Bungie that kind of shared their stories. And it was heartbreaking, because these developers are all guardians, are also people that invested into as players. So to hear those stories, I think that to really honor those people in the community, that the franchise has to come to an end and that we need something new. How that is going to work monetarily and financially, I don't know. You know, it's not looking good either way, but I think my opinion around Destiny is that like this is it, and that's coming from someone who has like a deep love for this. Yeah, I think that's where I stand. I really hope that the people that lost their jobs, you know, find work, and that they continue to do things passionately, because at the end of the for me, like that's just like it hurts my soul. It really does hurt as a human being, because like the world's in a tough place, man. Like we're 2024 is a great year to be alive, and there are so many experiences that no one before us could ever even imagine, but in the same breath come with huge problems. Like, I know we're just talking about Bungie, but mass layoffs has just been a general trend in the gaming industry.
Yeah, for the past, I want to say through 2-3 years now.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so I think when I have a son, and so I do think about legacy. I do think about, you know, future generations. And so like, how do we encourage or even support our kids and, you know, the kids in our lives who do aspire to get into the gaming industry, when all of this news is just like, you know, it's pushing towards this narrative that maybe it's not a lucrative space for people to invest into. Yeah. I'm ranting at this point, but I think you get the sentiment.
It's a good rant. It's a good rant. I mean, that's also the reason why, for me, it's been a bit of a challenge, because you know, we've had conversations about that before, right? Because I want to work in the game industry, and I have been, you know, looking into it for quite some time now. And I gotta be honest, if it wasn't for a certain Twitch streamer, Pirate Software, I don't know if you know him or have seen his content on YouTube, especially the YouTube Shorts. The man is an inspirational wizard.
I love that.
And he is also a developer. He's worked many years. He's worked at Blizzard. He's worked at Amazon Games. He's like his own indie developer now. His own studio.
I do follow him. Long hair.
Yeah. You know the guy. Yeah. Amazing guy. That really got me into, like, you know what? Like, he says, just start making games. So that's what I've been doing. You know, that's also part of the thing, right? You see a lot of indie developers popping up and popping off. Not to sugarcoat it, but they have been doing really well.
Absolutely.
And you see a lot of amazing games. Like, for example, a new indie developer who used to work actually at Game Freak, a Pokemon designer.
Cool.
And he was like one of, if not the first non-Japanese hire that Game Freak had. He's making his first game. It's almost out. Like, he partnered with like another developer, and they've been working on this game called The Plucky Squire. If you haven't seen it, holy smokes! First of all, it looks very, very adorable. It looks clean, and it looks like a lot of fun.
Oh, I love the art.
Yeah, it's so gosh darn pretty.
It's so cute.
It's really pretty. It's really cute. And then, like, you have this cool mechanic of shifting between 2D and 3D. And it's like this cute little storybook, but then, like, you pop out of the storybook and you explore the 3D world, and it looks like a lot of fun. It's coming out, I want to say September 17th or something.
Oh, very, very close.
Yeah, very, very close. They just announced, as of this recording, they just announced that it's almost coming out. I don't know when this episode is going to come out, so by the time this episode drops, maybe by that time it's already out. If you haven't checked out The Plucky Squire yet, check it out, because it looks amazing.
Awesome.
And he's already designed other games before at Game Freak. One of the two, actually. One of them was a 3DS game called Harmonite, which was this cute little rhythm game. The other one was Tembo the Badass Elephant, also surprisingly semi-rhythm-y, also a platformer. So knows this stuff. Like, seeing stuff like that, right? Seeing cool indie titles like that, you know, games like Slay the Spire,
yes,
Rogue Legacy. What's the other one? I was about to say? Dead Cells. You know, like the Hades games.
Oh man,
just like seeing that kind of level of creativity being essentially unbridled by like publishers that want specific targets and blah 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 and whatever, what have you. I think that thriving in this kind of environment gives me a little bit more hope for the industry. But at the same time, you like your popcorn flicks, right? You like your superhero movies. You like your you like your like action flicks. You like your big
box,
tentpole movies. So and the same thing goes for gaming, right? You also want to have those AAA experiences that make you feel like you're experiencing something that you couldn't otherwise. Seeing that part die off is sad, unless something crucially changes about how these big publishing houses do their work. We're going to see a lot of talent go either elsewhere or worse, just straight up quitting and not coming back to the gaming industry at all, because that's also happened before in the past. That might also be happening right now because the game industry is very tight-knit and talent might get some new jobs in the game industry. Talent might also consider, hey, I've been treated crappily for the past 10 years. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm just going to look for a different job outside of this industry. Which would be very sad because, that's just a lot of talent lost.
Yeah. And that's, exactly what you're saying is what I have seen on LinkedIn amongst developers who have lost their jobs. And, it's hard to stay hopeful. There are those who remain optimistic and that, we will bounce back as an industry and that people just need to recognize that there is a huge cultural shift here. And I think that maybe part of that is also educating the consumer as to what goes into game development. I would argue to say that a large us as a consumer actually don't know the work and the efforts and the money that go into development, and so there is this discrepancy between development and the consumer that it's just a huge disconnect, right? And so in order for people to be inspired and in order for people to feel safe in job security, I think that there needs to be a kind of an educational shift in the gaming industry and the culture, both on the executive level and at the consumer level, because the people in the middle are just like, they're hurting, man. They're hurting.
No kidding. And the funny part is actually, because I don't know if you know or realize it, but like at least 15 years ago or so, like, for example, Capcom was hurting bad. Right? Sega was hurting bad.
True.
And people are like, oh, it's going to be the end. It's like, are they going to get bought? Oh, like, I heard that, like, Ubisoft or something, they want to buy Capcom. Or, like, Xbox, like, want to buy Capcom. Or and Sega and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, and to me, and that was like, first of all, that's ridiculous. Don't even try it. Second of all, the way the corporate structure in Japan works is more about keeping, like, actual retention. When a company, a publicly traded company, does poorly, the people that are supposed to feel it first are the executives. So that's why you never see mass layoffs Japanese development houses. What will happen is their overseas offices will get layoffs because that's overseas and that's how it works over there. But their main offices will never have that same experience.
Right.
Like Nintendo doesn't fire people, as far as I can tell. Nintendo Limited in Japan. FromSoft, as far as I could tell, has never fired anybody.
And they made a statement.
Capcom is the only one where I remember that they did, like, well, Capcom and Konami are the only ones where we know that they fired them, but they presented it more as like, oh, we had an amicable split, right?
Yeah. Marketed differently.
Yeah, they marketed it differently, but also considering that he was at a higher position, they were able to do that.
Right.
If he was a lower position person, if it was just like the game designer, they would not have been able to touch him.
Sure.
Right? But because he was a higher position, they were able to basically work out a deal where he leaves and they don't give him credit anymore.
I see. Right.
The same thing happened like years prior with Arashi-san, the guy that was helming at the time Castlevania.
Right.
So he's the guy that was the director for Symphony of the Night, and basically because Symphony of the Night did well and all subsequent games in that style did well, the Metroidvania styles, he got a top position. At a certain point, the games were not doing well, and I think he actually left in that regard. Well, like for example, the head of the Mega Man franchise, I forget his name, something Koji, something whatever other. He did not have an amicable split, so a similar thing happened where they essentially went their separate ways. They fired him, and he basically started doing his own stuff. So he even set up his own company called Concept, and he put out a game. Was that not a great game? I don't know if you've ever heard of Mighty Number 9. I have heard of it. I have to preface, it was a Kickstarter, and I was a backer like day one.
Okay, you supported this.
I supported this because the vision,
of course,
good. Then the game came out, and it was bad. Here's the really messed up part about that one. They promised a 3DS version of that game that never saw a light of day, and we never heard of when that was ever supposed to come out. It just died, and they never talked about it.
Sad.
Yeah, not that I don't think that anybody is like heartbroken, but I can imagine the people that specifically got into the Kickstarter for that specific version are not too happy.
I see.
Yeah, so I think the last thing he did was he helmed like another game project, but that also went nowhere. So
Keiji Inafune?
Yes, Keiji Inafune. That's when we realized, Keiji Inafune is kind of now we know why Capcom got rid of him.
I see.
Which is also kind of still messed up because at the time he was working on Mega Man Legends 3.
Right.
And because he got ousted, that project also died. And it's never been touched ever again. I don't think that's ever going to happen because the last game that we got from Capcom in terms of Mega Man that wasn't a collection was Mega Man 11. And that already, I think that's also almost been almost 3-4 years now since that came out.
Yes.
It's like, so Mega Man 11, good. We're going to get a new Mega Man game? Probably not, at least not for the foreseeable future. Because, I don't think there's anybody at the company really championing Mega Man games at the moment. I mean, I guess we'll see. Yeah, it is.
Mega Man is a great franchise.
It is. It's a fun. I mean, it definitely has its downs.
Of course,
but the ups are really good.
They are. They really are. Oh boy.
Yeah. So I guess with that, I mean, at this point, Bungie's, because we were talking about Bungie, Bungie's future is definitely up in the air.
Yes.
It's basically a matter of time before they get absorbed into PlayStation proper and basically become a Herman Hulst-led studio, just like every other studio at this point. Which also was interesting because they were the only studio that were able to pull this off.
Yeah.
Being bought by a big company and still retain their autonomy.
Yeah,
and
it's so interesting.
This was basically like an experiment. Everybody was looking to Bungie to see if they could pull it off. Everybody expected them to pull it off. Unfortunately, they did not know what was going on in the background.
Yeah. It was such a guinea pig. And it sparked so much conversation. But at this point, with all of the news that's coming out, it's not looking too good.
Yeah, and I don't think any other company is going to try what Sony did. They're not like, you want to retain your autonomy? That chance.
Talking about Sony decisions is a whole other episode, Max.
Oh my gosh. No, okay. So actually, let's leave it. Let's leave it there. Otherwise,
we're going to be going for hours.
I don't want to keep you for too long, but I do want to say thank you so much for being here, RiceBoy, because I appreciate it. This was a really fun conversation. We should definitely do this again soon.
Thank you, man.
Sooner than later.
Like I said, in the fall, we'll be hitting the ground running. So, if we want to do this more often, let's. I'm getting better at using my calendar.
Yay!
Hooray for organization.
Yes, yeah. Me too, man. Just tell the people where they can find you. And check out the content that you do.
Absolutely, guys. So check it out. On Mondays, I am on a podcast called PlayStation Generation under Console Creatures on YouTube. And we do a weekly show talking about all things PlayStation, all that news, segue from. So if you want to see me on stream and or interact with me on socials, you can go to my Linktree /RiceBoyyyyT. Hopefully you can come through and we can play some games together or just hang out and get some.
Thank you so much. I will definitely leave some links in the YouTube version of this episode, so check out the links in the description. Yeah, that is it. Game Rivals, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to hit the like button. Subscribe if you want to follow more. Get to hit the bell button to get notified when a new episode drops. Listening to this on your favorite podcasting service, you can find us anywhere. Our home is on Spotify, but you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, on you name it, we're probably there. Find me also on Twitch every Tuesdays and Thursday, whenever that is possible for me. That's twitch.tv/Maximilian_X. And you can also find me on Instagram, which is, of course, Maximilian_X as well. You can find my updates there as well as on TikTok. So with that said, thank you guys so much for being here. As always, I've been Maximilian X, and this has been RiceBoyyyTV, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Later.